The ravens were stirring in their rookery when Brienne of Tarth rode through the gates of Winterfell at the quiet hour before dawn, her cloak damp with northern mist, and her thoughts heavy with the weight of an oath sworn far to the south. She had traveled hard from King's Landing, bearing the cryptic letter from Lord Eddard Stark that requested her presence for duties unnamed, and she felt the memories of that long road in every muscle. The stable smelled of straw and warm animals, and when the groom handed her a mug of steaming mulled cider, she drank deeply, grateful for the small kindness. Snowflakes drifted in the courtyard light, soft as moths. While Winterfell woke, blacksmiths' hammers began to ring, distant doors groaned, and somewhere a direwolf pup yipped at the sky. Brienne stood alone in the hush of it, drawing a slow breath, letting the cold settle into her lungs like iron. She found herself listening for the voices of doubt that once troubled her, but they were quiet now. She had left the jeers of Renly's camp behind, left the smirks and whispers behind, and in their place was only the vow she carried like a new-forged sword, to serve honor where honor called, no matter how far the road or how strange the summons. Catelyn Stark received her in the great hall, firelit and solemn beneath banners stitched with the direwolf. Lady Stark's red hair caught the hearth light as she stepped forward, her eyes assessing Brienne's height, her broad shoulders, the long reach of her arms. "Lord Eddard is grateful you answered," she said without preamble. Yet her tone held warmth. "Our son Bran believes himself a squirrel these days. He climbs everything, walls, towers, curtain stones. We worry what a single slip might cost him." Brienne bowed her head, feeling the simple clarity of the task settle around her like plate. "I will keep him safe." Catelyn's gaze softened, as though words could be trusted when spoken so plainly. Still, she led Brienne to the solar, where Ned Stark himself waited, his gray eyes steady beneath lines carved by cold wind and quiet duties. The Lord of Winterfell listened as Brienne pledged her sword, and when she finished, he offered a rueful half-smile. "My boy has a restless spirit. See that it is not broken before it has learned restraint." Duties began at once. Bran was only 7 yet bore himself as if every stone of Winterfell knew his name. When Brienne found him in the Godswood that first morning, he dangled from a low branch of the heart tree, wolf's blood bright in his grin. He spoke of the view from the first keep, of the rookery's hidden ledges, of a crumbling turret where the stones sang in the wind. "I climb because the world is taller than the walls," he told her, as though revealing the first secret of a coming age. Brienne, who had once climbed trees on Tarth to escape squires' taunts, understood the longing. Yet she saw too the slick moss, the loose mortar, the quiet deceits of gravity. She shadowed him through the morning, across ramparts dusted with snow, up narrow stairs whose steps spiraled into a sky the color of hammered steel, and spoke little, trusting presence more than admonition. Bran's direwolf pup padded at their heels, silver fur bristling each time a raven called. Servants paused to stare at the strange pair, the towering lady knight and the small boy with eyes like a winter storm. Somewhere in those looks Brienne caught familiar notes of curiosity and disbelief, but they washed over her as gently as drifting ash. Her focus rested on Bran's footing, the curl of his fingers on rock, the subtle tremor of a stone as it shifted under weight. By twilight she had begun to discern the pattern of Bran's freedom. He tested edges exactly where adults ceased to look, leapt gaps precisely wide enough to thrill but not kill. Once, on the East Wall walk, the boy poised himself on a merlin while dusk painted the world crimson. Brienne stepped nearer without haste, palms open. "A true knight wins no battles against the sky," she murmured. Bran's brows knit in thought, and he hopped back to safety with a shrug that was somehow both reluctant and relieved. They spoke little of the incident afterward, but an unspoken accord formed, and Catelyn, watching from a window, allowed her furrowed worry lines a brief respite. Supper in the hall was venison, onions, and dark bread. Bran sat between his sisters, telling them how the wind tasted atop the broken tower. Arya demanded Brienne's confirmation of every claim, her eyes bright with envy. Sansa, smiling with practiced politeness, thanked the Honorable Lady Brienne for safeguarding her brother, and Brienne blushed as though she had been knighted a second time inside a child's gratitude. That night, sleep eluded her. In the guest chambers, beneath a slanted roof, she polished Oathkeeper until the blade gleamed with firelight and memory. She thought of Renly's rainbow guard, of the mirror-bright armor she once dreamed would earn respect, and of how the dream shifted when Renly's blood soaked tent canvas. Now the world felt starker, rid of illusions, yet Ned Stark's summons had not been for show. There was only a boy and the emptiness between stone and ground. She whispered a prayer to the seven, then added a tentative word to the old gods, unsure which held greater sway in the north. Wind rattled shutters. Somewhere a direwolf howled. Brienne finally slept, her dreams full of root and bone and towers climbing into stars far too distant to fall. Morning brought brittle cold, and a sky clear as cut glass. Bran greeted her with impatience, tugging her cloak, urging her toward the tallest tower you've ever seen. She let him lead, noting every crack in every step. They passed mason marks older than the Targaryen conquest, past windows warm with lamplight, until they reached the base of the Tower of the Hand. Bran's grin shone like a sword freshly honed. "Bet you think I'm mad," he said. Brienne regarded the height, not murderous, but merciless. "I think you are brave," she answered. "But even brave men wear armor." She held out a braided rope she had fashioned before dawn, loops knotted at intervals. Bran's eyes lit with surprise as he recognized its purpose. "If a foot slips, the rope catches," she explained. "If a rock crumbles, the rope holds." He accepted it, cheeks flushed. Together they climbed, Brienne below, anchoring each loop with silent strength, Bran above, light as wind. Halfway up, Raven startled from a ledge in a clatter of wings, and Bran froze, heart hammering. Brienne's steady voice rose like a well-tuned horn. "Breathe, my lord. The rope is your friend." Bran exhaled, gripping firmer, and the climb resumed. At the summit parapet, the world unfurled. Forests stretching to ghostly horizons. The King's Road a pale scar, the mills along the White Knife trailing wood smoke. Bran rocked on his heels, euphoria pure as newly fallen snow. Brienne, though dizzy from the climb and the exposure, forced herself to memorize the boy's joy. It was why she had come, though she scarce dared confess it. But joy in a child's eyes was proof the realm could still be mended, stone by stone, heart by heart. Later, descending, they found old Nan telling stories to the younger Stark children by a brazier. Bran burst in, cheeks ruddy, proclaiming that Brienne climbed better than any bear, and that the rope was magic. Old Nan's watery eyes studied the tall knight. "Magic indeed," she cackled. A thread of fate, spun with true intent. Brienne's ears burned, yet she smiled. Days formed a rhythm. Morning drills in the yard with Sir Roderick, where Brienne's great sword carved frozen air and sent trainee squires stumbling. Bran watched, wide-eyed, as she sparred with Jon Snow. Jon, courteous but fierce, tested her guard until sparks flew from clashing steel. After each bout he thanked her with a nod just shy of a bow, and Brienne recognized in him the same quiet hunger for honor she carried. Afternoons belonged to Bran's explorations. She escorted him past the hot springs that steamed beneath flagstones, up to the library where Maester Luwin's ravens croaked riddles, even out onto iced-over pools, where the reeds cracked underfoot like breaking glass. Each venture ended only when candles lit in the windows and the sky bruised lavender. And each night, she reported to Lord and Lady Stark, detailing successes and hazards alike. Ned listened with the scrutiny of a blacksmith, judging a blade's temper. Catelyn's thanks came softer, but her eyes held a mother's relief. On the 7th evening, a week to the day since her arrival, Bran's adventurous spirit smoldered hotter than the hearths. He begged permission to attempt the highest roof in Winterfell. The broken tower, abandoned after lightning split its crown years before. Brienne considered. The structure leaned, stones sheared, but a narrow inner stair remained intact according to Bran's rambling tales. She bargained. Dawn departure, rope and ice spikes in hand, a promise of absolute obedience. Bran agreed, drawing an X over his heart with solemn finger. Catelyn protested yet relented when Brienne pledged her own lifeblood before witness. Arya demanded to accompany, but Ned's firm no quashed the rebellion, leaving the girl to practice needle thrusts in the yard while chewing her lip. Dawn of the 8th day arrived with a hush heavy as blankets. Frost jeweled the courtyard, and the broken tower loomed like a jagged tooth against dim light. Ghost, Jones' albino deer wolf, trailed them to the tower door and sat sentinel, red eyes unblinking. Brienne tested each step. Weight steady, shield slung on her back to keep hands free. Bran followed, iron nails on his boots tapping a rhythm of youthful resolve. The stairs spiraled through shadow shot with thin slits of light, each landing littered with fallen mortar. Halfway, Bran paused, pointing up. "There's a platform where the roof fell. From there you can touch the sky." Brienne nodded, but her gaze lingered on hairline fissures in the inner wall. They climbed slower, breath white in torchlight. At the next landing, a stone gave a sick crunch. Bran flinched yet remained secure in the harness Brienne had looped around her own waist. She braced foot and shoulder until the tremor ceased, then guided him on. Reaching the open platform felt like surfacing from deep water. Sunlight exploded around them, scattering the gloom. Wind tugged Bran's hair across his eyes, and he laughed. Arms spread as though the wind itself were reins. Brienne knelt, anchoring their rope to a protruding block. Beyond the parapet the ground dipped dizzyingly, and she sensed the tower's subtle sway, timbers mourning their age. Bran shuffled toward the edge, peering down. "I can see Ghost," he whispered, voice rippling with awe. Brienne settled beside him, one gauntleted hand resting on stone, ready. She wanted to speak of caution, of the consequences of even a single misjudged inch. But Bran's joy disarmed speech, and she allowed herself a breath of the same winter-pure air. That moment split the day. Below, a cry echoed. Host barking, perhaps, or Arya shouting across the yard. Bran leaned, trying to glimpse. A stone beneath his boot flicked away with a crunch. He yelped, arms pinwheeling. Brienne lunged, gloved fingers closing around his jerkin, muscles coiling as the full drag of his dangling weight wrenched her toward the void. She dug steel-shod toes into mortar, the rope straining across her shoulders. Bran's small hands clawed for purchase, boots scraping. For a heartbeat too long, gravity roared above every other sound. Then the rope drew taut. The harness bit into Brienne's ribs, and momentum stilled. Bran dangled inches from empty sky, breathless. Brienne's knuckles whitened around the rope's anchor, but slowly, methodically, she pulled him back. Inch by excruciating inch, until at last he collapsed against her cuirass, sobbing. She held him there, listening to her own heart hammer like a war drum, until the tremor running through his limbs subsided. "No more today," she said, voice low as thunder beyond hills. Bran nodded into her mailed shoulder, face wet with frightened tears. Together, they descended, each step measured. At the tower base, Ghost whined, nosing Bran's leg. When they emerged into the courtyard, Arya streaked toward them, eyes huge. "I heard shouting," but Bran shook his head, clinging still to Brienne's hand. Catelyn arrived moments later, drawn by unseen currents of maternal intuition. Words were scant, relief heavy. Brienne excused herself only after Bran's trembling had calmed into the warmth of his mother's arms. She retreated to the practice yard and swung her sword until sweat steamed from her in the cold. Each stroke carved away the lingering image of a boy's silhouette in freefall, replacing it with certainty in rope, in oath, in the tensile strength of vigilance. Jon Snow approached when dusk burned purple. "You saved him," he said, neither question nor praise. Brienne halted mid-swing, blade tip lowering. "A knight's duty." Jon looked toward the broken tower's jagged crown. "Most knights would have failed." His words carried no flattery, only plain truth. Brienne felt it settle in her chest like a steadying heartbeat. In the aftermath, Bran's climbing lessened. He spent mornings with Maester Luwin, afternoons practicing archery under Robb's tutelage. Yet the restless spark in his eyes had not died. It smoldered, tempered by new respect for Height's silent power. And Brienne remained his shadow, teaching him knots, balance stances, the art of reading weather on stone. They spoke oft of stories, of Sir Galladon of Morn and his magic sword, of Nymeria crossing the narrow sea. of the kings of winter who fought giants in the snows of ages past. Bran listened rapt, asking why the songs seldom spoke of women wielding steel. Brienne answered gently, because those who sing the songs remember what they wish, and forget what frightens them. The boy thought on this, then declared he would one day write a song of Sir Brienne the Tall, who fought the sky and won. She laughed, an unguarded peal that startled a raven from a chimney. Winter closed its fist weeks later, bringing storms that rattled shutters and sheathed the walls in glassy ice. Torches guttered in hallways where drafts prowled like hungry spirits. Brienne's watch grew fiercer. Each morning she broke frost from the rope harness. Each night she walked ramparts to gauge where snowdrifts clung precariously. Bran kept to the castle's heart, yet occasionally she caught him staring at windows, tracing the flight of snowflakes as if charting invisible footholds. When winds howled too fiercely for even servants to venture, she shared with Bran the discipline of stillness. How a knight could conquer impulse by mastering breath. How heroes in stories survived storms by adhering to patience. They practiced sitting unmoving for counts of 100 heartbeats, while candles flickered. Bran found the trial maddening at first, but gradually he learned its quiet reward, a clarity that thinned distractions into nothingness. During one such lesson, Bran asked why Brienne had come so far to guard a boy she'd never met. She weighed honesty, then spoke of Renly's death, of oaths shorn of meaning by blade and flame, of quests that failed because knights sought glory rather than purpose. When a true lord calls for help, she said, it is a privilege to answer. Bran's face, lit by a candelabra-orange glow, absorbed her words like new snow holds boot prints. Then I will grow to be a true lord, he murmured, so that when I call, brave knights will still answer. Brienne felt the heat behind her eyes and turned away lest the boys see tears. Outside, wind keened through arrow slits with a sound like distant wolves. Spring, when at last it arrived, did so in small mercies. Icicles melting into rivulets that laughed down stone, crocuses bold enough to pierce lingering snow. Bran surprised Brienne one morning with a wooden token he'd carved. A little shield, no bigger than a coin, painted blue with a single yellow lily, her sigil redesigned by his youthful imagination. He pressed it into her palm. For luck, he said. She strung it on a leather thong and wore it next to her heart beneath iron plates. She had never possessed a keepsake so light that carried such weight. Yet neither spring's thaw nor children's laughter could hold darkness forever at bay. Ravens began arriving from the south bearing tidings of King Robert Baratheon's death. Ned Stark prepared to ride for King's Landing, and the castle's mood soured with unease. On the eve of his departure, Ned summoned Brienne. I leave my family in your vigilance, he said, placing a calloused hand upon her mailed forearm. Guard them against all snares, the seen and the unseen. Brienne bowed, though her stomach hollowed at the thought of the realm's center roiling in chaos even as Winterfell remained a beacon of fragile calm. She wanted to offer words of comfort, yet foresaw their insufficiency. Instead she said, your children stand upon firm ground while I breathe, my lord. Ned's gaze lingered, measuring truth, then he nodded. Brienne felt the trust pass between them like a torched flame lighting a fresh candle. After Ned's party rode out, Bran clung to routine with renewed fervor. Archery drills, reading, measured climbs now sanctioned and supervised. One afternoon, high on the wall walk, he asked, if the realm falls to fighting, will Winterfell be safe? Brienne considered the horizon's dim line, where dark clouds bruised the blue. Safety is seldom a place, she answered, more often a promise kept by those who choose to keep it. Bran rested arms on the parapet, contemplative beyond his years. Then I choose, he said softly, to keep Winterfell safe. She placed her hand atop his, not as guardian to ward but as knight to comrade. For a long while they stood together, listening to the ravens speak secrets only the wind understood. Late summer brought a letter sealed in Lannister crimson. Catelyn read it behind closed doors, eyes flint hard when she emerged. Robb summoned his bannermen. War drummed in distant Southron marches. Brienne watched the preparations, blacksmiths forging spearheads, seamstresses stitching wolf-emblazoned cloaks, stable hands breaking fresh horses. Bran begged to ride with the host. Catelyn forbid it. The boy sulked until Brienne took him to the Godswood and demonstrated sword forms with a willow switch. She spoke of patience, of wars fought long before swords touched steel, wars of discipline against fear, of knowledge against ignorance. Bran's frown eased into concentration. He mimicked her movements beneath the weirwood's bleeding leaves, his shadow flickering across sacred faces carved in bark. Somewhere beyond walls thick with history, destiny aligned nations like pieces on a Savas board. But within the Godswood, there was only the soft whisper of switch through air, and the slow forging of a boy into something more enduring than legend. As autumn flames began licking treetops gold, Ned Stark's name arrived by raven bound to the word traitor, and the realm shuddered. Catelyn's grief turned Winterfell colder than any snow. Bran wept in secret corners. Robb marched south with an army of wolves. And though the castle's heart trembled, Brienne's vigil did not slacken. She walked ramparts in moonlight, watched for riders on the King's Road, studied the stars the way sailors see guiding beacons. She sensed that the true storm lunged unseen, tooth and claw poised in shadows beyond men's disputes. One night, Bran woke screaming of three-eyed crows and broken men, of a tower taller than sky. Brienne held him while servants kindled fresh torches. He described dreams of flying. "But I have no wings," he cried. She smoothed damp hair from his brow and reminded him that ropes, harnesses, and willing hands could imitate wings. Yet inside her she nursed a gnawing worry. Dreams sometimes foretold. She resolved to tighten guard, to lessen him further in resilience of mind as well as body. Days followed of finding the boy staring at ravens as though decoding mysteries in their flight. Brienne stood beside him, silent, allowing the unknown to unfold at its own pace. Winter came again, sudden, sharp. Snow hid war's footprints, but tales arrived nonetheless. Whispers of Ned's execution, of Robb's victories, of Lannister gold buying daggers in every alley. Through it all, Bran walked the walls under Brienne's watch. Smaller now inside furs and weighted by sorrow, yet his spine remained unbowed. Brienne saw in him the steely seed of future lordship, and felt fierce pride swell like storm tides when they practiced balanced steps across a narrow beam fallen in the courtyard. Bran slipped, yet instead of fear his face lit with determination. "Again," he said, climbing back. She nodded approval. Time in Winterfell stretched like spun glass, beautiful, fragile, liable to shatter at the faintest strike. And on a day whose dawn resembled the one upon which Brienne had first arrived, she found herself kneeling before Bran as he placed a small wooden crown of pine needles upon Ghost Head, declaring his direwolf a knight of the realm. "Sir Ghost," he pronounced gravely. Brienne laughed until her ribs ached. The direwolf blinked, perplexed, then shook, sending pine needles flying like green sparks. Bran's laughter joined hers, high and clear, a chime against encroaching gloom. In that moment, Brienne understood that her oath had grown beyond protection. It had become the nurturing of hope against the tide of the world's cruelties. And so the days continued, each laced with threat, yet anchored by resolve. The boy who once chased towers for the taste of wind now learned that heights could be scaled by the mind as surely as by the body. And the woman who once chased acceptance discovered that the surest validation lay in the quiet steadiness of a duty fulfilled. Together, they held Winterfell's fragile peace in hands, calloused by rope and sword, and guarded by a promise no arrow could pierce. When ravens next arrived bearing tidings that Robb Stark, king in the north, summoned his brother to River Run, Bran turned to Brienne, eyes shining with the gravity of paths diverging. But that journey, and the perils it promised, awaited beyond the turning of the next page, where vows would be tested anew, and the skies above a boy's dreams would darken with wings neither rope nor honor alone could master. K. The summons from River Run arrived on a chill breeze that rattled Winterfell's wind vanes like thin shields. Bran found Brienne in the practice yard where she sparred with Sir Roderick, her blade ringing bright sparks from his, both fighters wrapped in cloaks of breath. When the bout ended and the old knight lowered his sword with a grunt of respect, Bran thrust the parchment toward her, fingers trembling in spite of leather gloves. Robb's seal. The dire wolf crowned with iron. His words were few, but their urgency thrummed between the lines like a pulse. The king in the north commanded his brother's presence, counsel, he wrote, and necessity, and family. No more could be said by Raven, for Lannister gold bought eyes as readily as it bought steel. They stood there a moment, the boy and the knight, snow settling on their shoulders. Bran's breathing quickened, equal parts excitement and dread. Outside Winterfell's walls lay a world he knew only through maps and Nan's stories. Brienne read the letter twice, then met his gaze. She could feel the twang of fate tightening, as palpable as bowstring. "We will ride at dawn," she said, calm as falling snow. Preparation bloomed across the castle like frost flower. Grooms brushed down shaggy northern horses. Blacksmiths checked rivets on saddles and hammered new shoes until red-hot iron hissed in snow. Maester Luwin pressed a roll of bandages and vials of tincture into Brienne's hands, murmuring one prayer to the seven and another to the old gods for breadth of coverage. Catelyn lingered longest in Bran's chamber, adjusting his cloak, smoothing imagined creases from his tunic, even though he had dressed himself hours earlier. Brienne watched the mother fuss with small broken motions, as though each touch might stall time's march. Finally Catelyn stepped back, tears glimmering but unshed. "Keep him from reckless courage," she whispered to Brienne. "And from reckless fear?" Brienne inclined her helm in wordless vow. Dawn led copper across the courtyard as they mounted. Brienne rode a tall gray gelding named Coldwind. Her armor burnished dull to avoid catching a sniper's sunflash. Bran sat astride a chestnut mare called Cousin, reins clutched but loose, his legs wrapped in quilted greaves Maester Luwin had insisted upon for warmth. Ser Roderick led a column of 20 men-at-arms, archers in mottled cloaks, spearmen with shields rimed in iron. Hullen, the master of horse, oversaw loading of 2 supply wagons drawn by oxen laden with dried meats, oats, and fletched arrows. Wolves howled farewell. Ghost padded beside Bran's stirrup before loping back to Jon's empty chambers, missing his boy. Arya blew Bran a kiss from the battlements. Sansa waved with a solemn grace she practiced like a psalm. And then the portcullis rose on rattling chains, and Winterfell slid behind them like a shuttered memory. The king's road south of the last river felt at first like a cut through legend. Endless ranks of sentinel pines, their limbs etched white, and a hush broken only by raven calls overhead. Bran rode near Brienne's stirrup, asking questions in flurries. How many leagues to Moat Cailin? Whether Robb had grown a beard yet? Whether knights truly jousted in war? Brienne answered what she could, deflecting with gentle humor when curiosity veered toward nightmares. Her watch was constant, glances tracking tree-lined shadows for glint of steel, ears tuned for crossbows' twang disguised as cracking limb. Men-at-arms joked to loosen cold stiff jaws, but she felt taut as mooring rope in storm. 3 days brought them to the neck, where fog slithered among reeds like pale serpents. Here Brienne's vigilance redoubled. Bogs swallowed hooves without sound, and tales told of crannogmen whose arrows found throats before faces emerged from cattails. Yet Ser Roderick waved a token, a woven rush knot that spoke truce to Howland Reed's folk, and they passed unmolested, though eyes pricked the mist. Nights they camped on narrow hummocks, fires banked low, sentries stepping gingerly lest earth gulp them whole. Bran slept with his head pillowed on saddlebags, dreams twitching through limbs that refused stillness. Brienne dozed, seated, back against Coldwind's flank, hand closed around sword hilt. South of Moat Cailin the land rose drier, woods opening into rolling fields patch-quilted in frost silver. Refugees blurred past them, farmers with carts piled high, children bundled like laundry, small folk fleeing whispers of hostilities, sliding northward like oil upon water. Bran watched their drawn faces, cheeks hollow as river stones, and his earlier questions fell silent. On the 9th night, they shared camp with a party of Karstark outriders bearing tidings. Jaime Lannister's vanguard harried towns along the Blue Fork, burning mills, seizing grain. Robb gathered bannermen at River Run, planning swift counterstroke. Hearing this, Bran sat long by the fire, expression shuddered. Brienne placed a blanket over his shoulders when chill deepened, but he scarcely stirred. It was on the 12th day that the world shifted beneath them. They had left the King's Road to cut west along a hunter's track flanking the Red Fork, hoping to avoid Lannister scouts. Woods grew dense, branches interlacing overhead in green-black gloom. Afternoon light turned watery, smells of moss and leaf rot thick. Brienne slowed her horse, senses prickling. The road turned narrow between twin boulders, choke point perfect for ambush. She signaled a halt. Sir Roderick was opening his mouth when the first quarrel hissed from shadow and buried itself in Hullen's breast. Chaos erupted. More bolts, shrill. Men-at-arms shouting, horses shrilling in terror. Brienne heeled Coldwind forward, shield up, vision narrowing to shapes flitting like smoke among trunks. She glimpsed red and gold on a sleeve. Lannister colors. Spears tumbled from cart sides. Bran's mare skittered sideways, Bran clinging to saddle. Brienne bellowed above the din, orders crisp as drawn steel. Archers loose, form shield wall, and wrenched Cousin's bridle, dragging Bran behind her. Two Lannister riders burst through the brush, blades gleaming. Brienne spurred Coldwind straight at them. Her sword met the first rider's helm with a clang that jarred her shoulder. Momentum toppled him backward. The second slashed at Bran, who ducked low, but the edge caught his cloak, dragging him half from saddle. Brienne swung, severing cloak string, then slammed shield rim across the attacker's face. Blood sprayed bark. Bran scrambled upright, eyes wide but unweeping. The fight compressed into fragments. Sir Roderick locking axes with a sergeant, stark spears driving two foes into swampy ditch, arrows zipping like angry wasps. Brienne's world distilled to Bran's breathing behind her, and the quiver of impact each time shield caught steel. At last a horn sounded retreat. Surviving Lannisters melted away, leaving red stains on snow. 10 Stark men lay still. Another dozen bled from cuts. Bran knelt beside Hullen's body, whispering the groom's name. Brienne rested a gauntleted hand on his shoulder, feeling the quaking contained there. Night fell bruise purple, and they buried the dead beneath cairns of stone hauled by trembling arms. Maester Luwin's potion eased Bran's shaking, but his silence lasted long into firelit dark. They reached River Run at sunset 3 days later, banners of leaping trout and direwolf snapping together above the drawbridge. Horns called welcome, riverbirds crying accompaniment. Robb rode out, gray direwolf stalking beside his destrier. Bran slid from saddle before his brother halted, and threw arms round his waist. Robb held him fiercely, eyes bright with unshed tears of grief and relief. Brienne dismounted, offering the formal salute of sword across heart. Robb took her hands. They said a knight of impossible height guarded him. Now I see the truth of both. He thanked her in words heavy as chainmail. She bowed and accepted quarter among the king's honor guard. Inside River Run's walls, war hummed. Smithies clanged day and night, couriers dashed across courtyards, and strategists hunched over candlelit maps like crows over carrion. Yet Edmure Tully welcomed Bran to solar lessons by quiet pool gardens, offering respite. Catelyn embraced her youngest son so tightly he squeaked, though laughter soon replaced tension. Even in war, mothers required proof of flesh and blood. Brienne took her place among Robb's captains. In council she spoke little, but eyes and ears drank every plan. Stealth crossing at Twins, hairy supply lines, feigned retreat toward Seaguard. She tracked dispositions like puzzle pieces, seeing where her sword might best fit. At nights, she drilled footmen in shield discipline, honing them into living ramparts. Bran watched from battlements, memorizing footwork. Once he tried to mimic a thrust with practice blade. Brienne corrected his stance, guiding elbow, repositioning shoulder. Her hands were gentle yet firm, sculpting form from curiosity. Weeks folded into each other like pleated banners. Spring stirred again, coaxing green shoots from riverbanks. But along with the blossoms came ravens bearing darker petals of news. Stannis had declared himself king. Renly's camp murmured of rainbow banners. Tywin mustered hosts at Harrenhal. War multiplied like hydra heads, each severed only to spawn more. Robb resolved to march for the Whispering Wood, seeking the king's lair's capture to barter for Ned, still rumored prisoner. Bran begged to ride beside him. Catelyn forbade it. Brienne found Bran in the Godswood garden that evening, hurling pebbles into a lily-choked pond. He turned, cheeks flushed with injustice. "They think me a babe," he hissed. "But I seen battle, bled for our men." Brienne knelt, bringing her face to his level. "Battle is not proof of worth, only proof of peril," she said. "Courage is sometimes the grit to wait, not the fury to charge." Bran's shoulders sagged, but a spark of comprehension kindled behind his eyes. Robb rode at dawn, Grey Wind leading. Brienne watched from Wall Walk, uneasy. With Robb gone, River Run felt hollowed, though Edmure strutted corridors with new swagger. Catelyn drew inward, shuddering grief behind councils and ledgers. Bran drifted, restless. Brienne channeled his energy, archery at sunrise, balancing on beam over moat at midday, reading the seven-pointed star by lantern at night. He mastered a knight's bow, draw faster than boys twice his age, muscles honed by climbs. Convenience turned to necessity when refugees clogged River Run's gates, and Bran marshaled pages to distribute bread, his presence lending stark gravitas that soothed riotous tempers. Brienne watched, impressed by how leadership sat upon his thin shoulders like a fur cloak grown for him alone. Yet unease crawled. Scouts returned with tales of Lannister cavalry sweeping along the Red Fork, pillaging grain meant for River Run. Edmure dismissed them. "My outriders will guard the granaries." But Brienne saw Bran's eyes darken, sensing hunger's specter. That night she approached Catelyn in her solar. "If River Run starves, no walls will save it," she warned. "A smaller party might slip through and rescue stores." Catelyn's gaze flicked to maps. "Edmure will hear nothing of leaving strong walls." Brienne hesitated, then gestured toward Bran playing chess with Maester Vyman by hearth. "The boy sees." Catelyn's mouth pressed thin. "He sees too much." But the next dawn found Brienne, Bran, and a dozen mounted rangers riding north under Fog Banner, sanctioned by a quiet nod from Catelyn and a furious tirade from Edmure slept through. Their objective lay at Fairmarket's outskirts. Granaries seized by Ser Adam Marbrand's detachment. Brienne devised plans swift and breathless as hawk stoop. Divide force, feign flight, lure guards into ambush. She briefed her men beneath Willow Stand, voice low. Bran listened, fidgeting but focused. Brienne assigned him to Arrowloft Vantage where he could watch but remain safe. "No heroics," she intoned. He nodded, swore oath. Thunder of hooves announced their charge just before noon. Brienne led frontal assault, cold wind devouring ground, standard of direwolf sewn in blue streaming. Lannister guards scrambled, forming Pike's line. Brienne angled left at last instant. Rangers loosed arrows into staggered foes. Bran, perched in tree perch built in minutes, watched lines collapse like children's blocks. He knocked arrow, stomach fluttering, but remembered Brienne's command and held. Instead he called warning when new riders flanked, his shout piercing battle din. Brienne pivoted, intercepting with shield raised. Clash echoing, two Lannister knights crashed into her. Her blade rose, parried, riposted, steel shrieking. One foe toppled, the other wheeled, but Bran's ranger skewered him. Granaries fell quickly thereafter. Fires lit by Lannisters to deny grain smoldered, but died beneath frantic buckets. Brienne kicked open doors, revealing mounds of barley and rye. Victory tasted of smoke and sweat, and Bran laughed aloud when sacks spilled golden grain across floorboards. They loaded wagons, hitched spare horses, and rode back under dusk, painted raven wing. Small folk along road lifted heads to cheer. Malnourished hope flickering a new dotty. Triumph soured upon return. Edmure berated them for disobedience before assembled court, face mottled with anger and humiliation. Brienne endured in silence, though her pulse thudded. Bran stepped forward, voice clear. "We saved 300 sacks of grain, uncle. Would you have them wrought?" The hall hushed. Edmure sputtered, then swung petulance at Brienne. A hedge knight without sense of command structure. Catelyn intervened, her calm edge flintier than any forge. "The command structure that starves its people soon commands only ghosts." Edmure subsided, though resentment lingered. Brienne bowed, withdrew with Bran. That night Bran asked if honor always required suffering fools. Brienne smiled wearily. Honor is no sword belt you may unclasp when travel grows hard. It chafes, yes, but holds blade at your side. Bran nodded, pondering. Letter arrived next morning. Robb's host crushed Jaime Lannister at Whispering Wood, the Kingslayer captive. River Run erupted in roar of victory. Yet within jubilation, new complexities sprouted like weeds. Lords clamored for release of Ned. Lannister envoys demanded exchange. Robb hesitated, seeing better leverage in holding Jaime. Catelyn's grief opened raw. Bran found her weeping beside the same Godswood pool, where lilies wilted in heat. She clutched a letter bearing Ned's careful hand, steady to the last, telling her to keep faith. Bran knelt. Mother and son shared tears until water glimmered double. Bran's dreams intensified. Three-eyed crows, direwolves howling along unseen cliffs, and a door of weirwood carved with spirals calling him north. He confided in Brienne one dawn as they walked ramparts. She listened, brow furrowed. Dreams sometimes carry truth clad in riddles, she said, thinking of priestesses' prophecies whispered by Stormlander campfires. But truth may wait its hour. Bran touched cold stone, eyes distant. The crow says, I must fly. Brienne laid hand on his shoulder. If flight is to come, let wings grow strong with patience. During lull that followed, Brienne forged deeper camaraderie with River Run soldiers. She sparred often with Great John Umber, their matches leaving watchers, horse and coin purses, emptier from wagers. Even Edmure begrudgingly praised her drill regimen. Yet whispers wound through halls. Tywin's massive host on the march. Renly slain under shadow of black magics. Stannis beaten at Blackwater by wildfire. The Game of Thrones turned more perilous each raven. One bleak morning, a column of Karstark men rode in bearing a wicker cage slung between horses. Inside knelt two young Lannister boys captured raiding supply carts, Willem and Tyon. Lord Rickard Karstark demanded they be held for ransom. Grief for his sons killed by Jaime seethed in every word. Catelyn fretted. Edmure stewed. Bran watched the boy's terror behind bars and turned away. Brienne found him in library, fingers tracing spines. They are no different than us, he whispered. Just wearing other colors. Brienne considered. Enemies by birth, perhaps. But mercy need not be enemy to justice. Bran looked up. Could mercy change a war? She wished for easy answer, but offered honesty instead. Mercy changes the one who grants it. Sometimes that is enough ground for new seeds. Bran pondered this until candles guttered. Robb's return brought thunder of hooves across drawbridge. Bran raced to greet him. Brienne followed at respectful distance. The king dismounted, weary but triumphant. Jaime Lannister led in chains. Brienne studied the famed Kingslayer. Gold hair tangled, green eyes bright with defiance despite bruises. She had looked on him once across Renly's pavilion and wondered at stories. Now she saw man, not myth. His gaze flicked over Bran, then Brienne, lingering a heartbeat before curling lips in ironic greeting. Grey wind growled low. Brienne's sword thumped free of scabbard an inch, instinctual. Robb clasped Bran's shoulders. You've grown. Bran grinned. You're filthy. They laughed, easing months of separation. Later, in war room heavy with candle smoke, Robb listened to Brienne's report of ambush and grain expedition. He commended her initiative, though caution glimmered in his eyes regarding Bran's exposure. The boy's fire, Brienne said. But fire wrought careful contemporary steel. Robb nodded, though worry lines etched deeper. Jaime's presence in River Run proved tinder. Lords debated ransoming him for Ned, Tywin for King's Landing prisoners, or executing him to appease Karstarks. At council's height of discord, Jaime taunted, boasting of Bran's fall and Catelyn's husband's capture. Bran lunged, fury rare and raw. Brienne caught him mid-stride, arms like iron bands. Silence crashed across hall. Jaime's smile sharpened shark-like. Robb ordered him removed. Later, Brienne knelt by Bran in courtyard where he punched training post until knuckles bled. He cannot unmake what never was, she said. Bran's breath steamed. I almost fell. But I didn't. Why does he still swing at me? Brienne wrapped cloth about his hand. Because cruelty festers in hearts where honor never grew roots. Your standing tall stings him deeper than any fall. Bran's clenched jaw eased, but anger smoldered. Robb resolved to march west, hitting Lannister supply lines. He appointed Edmure to hold River Run and left Brienne in charge of Bran's safety under explicit writ. Departure stripped Castle of bulk of host. Tension grew. Karstark men glared at Jaime's cell. River lords muttered of Tywin's advance. One thunderous night, Bran woke to steel ringing. Brienne bolted from pallet, sword drawn. Karstark soldiers stormed the dungeon, axes raised. She intercepted, blade flashing. Narrow corridors snarled combat into savage knots. She parried swing aimed at Bran when he followed, refusing to hide. Her riposte carved deep. Blood spattered torchlit stone. Jaime shouted, goading jests from cell. Chained yet relishing chaos. Catelyn arrived breathless, ordering cease. But grief-wrought rage blinded Lord Rickard's men. They surged again. Brienne stepped before them, shield broad as door, voice booming like Tarth surf. Yield or die, traitors, to your own king. The command carried more steel than threat. The men faltered. Edmure's garrison closed around them, disarming before slaughter spilled further. Afterward, Brienne escorted Bran back to quarters, boots crunching broken torch sconces. You said no heroics, he murmured. Gaze on blood drying across her vambrace. She sighed. Sometimes heroics hunt us. She removed stained armor piece, scrubbing at gore while candles danced. Catelyn, panicked Jaime might yet be killed, unchained him that same night, carving keys from Warder's belt. Brienne discovered them in dark corridor where torches sputtered. Jaime smirked at her approach. Catelyn, desperate, begged help to escort him secretly to exchange for the girls believed captive in King's Landing. Brienne's oath to Catelyn weighed heavier than any chain. Bran, having trailed her silently, stepped into torchlight. Take me instead, he offered. Father lives, he must. Catelyn, torn, shook head. Brienne knelt. I'm dying. My lady, let me escort the Kingslayer. Bran must remain. Her voice trembled with import. If Winterfell's line falters, North will splinter. Catelyn's hands shook on iron key. Tears gleamed. At last she nodded. Take him then. May the mother show us mercy. Brienne fastened Jaime's wrists, ignoring his sardonic quip about being chaperoned by a giant maid. Before dawn she prepared to ride with Jaime south to King's Landing. Perilous exchange ahead. Bran confronted her at stables, face pale but steady. Will you return? She knelt, pressed his wooden lily shield into his palm. So long as this token warms your heart, my path points home. He slipped leather thong over neck. She clasped his shoulders. Hold Winterfell here, she said, tapping his chest. Even far from its walls it will shelter you. Bran swallowed, nodded. As horses clattered across drawbridge, Bran climbed battlements, watching until their figures dwindled to specks melting into river mist. Wind tugged at his cloak. He rested hand over lily token, feeling its featherweight promise beat with his heart. River-run stones felt colder in her absence, yet also imbued with her strength, a bedrock he could stand upon. Days passed like slanting rain. Edmure fretted at gates. Letters from Robb spoke of victories muted by attrition. Catelyn confined to chambers under Edmure's orders for treasonous act. Though Bran visited daily, bringing apple slices and news of realm. Dreams returned, of ravens massing, of distant cries across ice fields. He woke one night, certain Winterfell burned. Maester Vyman soothed with milk of the poppy, but images lingered. Months dragged. No word from Brienne. Riverland campaigns seesawed. Then, on crisp morning, a rider bearing sigil of House Mallister approached. Bran hurried to courtyard. The rider presented sealed parchment for him. Blue wax, shaped as lily. Bran's fingers shook, breaking it. Inside, small scrap of silk, dyed Tarth blue, stained rusty brown but intact. One line inked beneath. Oath kept. Wings unbroken. Relief thundered through him. But dread followed when horns sounded along ramparts, signal of host approaching. Dust cloud on horizon resolved into columns of men wearing flayed man banners of House Bolton. 10-20 standards. Edmure rallied defenses, but gates lacked men enough. Bran felt tremor of fate again, the rope taut between towers and void. He strode to war room where Edmure and castellans argued. They broke off at sight of Boy. Bran spoke clear. We must parley. Bolton vows fealty to Robb. Perhaps he brings orders. Doubt flickered among lords, but Bran's conviction anchored them. Heralds rode forth under white flag. Bolton answers returned vague. Invitation to open gates for reinforcement. Bran sensed rot under velvet words. He urged Edmure caution. Edmure paradoxically found courage in his nephew's prudence. Ordering double guard, archers arrayed along merlons. Night fell with Bolton campfires kindling malign stars beyond moat. At dawn drums pounded. Roose Bolton sought audience, citing letters from Robb naming him Warden of the North. Bran, heart clanging, accompanied Edmure to drawbridge, flanked by guards. Bolton sat upon pale horse, eyes as bland as milk left too long. He produced parchment bearing Robb's seal, though Bran noted wax slightly awry. Claimed Robb's death at betrayal by phrase. Courtyard gasped. Bran's knees buckled, but he locked them, voice icy. You lie. Bolton raised brow, unperturbed. Your grace may confirm. Soon enough. Open your gates. Riverrun's defense now falls to House Bolton as loyal stewards. Edmure's face drained. He requested counsel inside. Bolton granted 1 hour. In Solar, chaos reigned. Lords sobbed. Some swore. Bran felt wind howl inside skull. He remembered Brienne's words. Safety is promise kept by those who choose to keep it. Choosing, he spoke. If Robb is dead, I am heir of Winterfell. Whisper rippled. I cannot yield Riverrun without proof, he continued. Nor trust Freyborn tale. Edmure stared. You would command us? Bran met his gaze. I would stand where wolves still stand. He walked to window, seeing Bolton ranks shift like predators in tall grass. We hold. Bolton horns blared war. Ziga engines rolled. Arrows streaked sky. Riverrun shuddered. Bran raced to battlements, stringing bow down. He loosed arrow after arrow, breath steady as Brienne taught. Archers followed his cadence. Stones fell from trebuchets, splashing moat. Fire arrows arched, but rivers dampened flames. Battle churned day into smoke tide. Bran moved along walls, lending courage by presence, quoting lines from stories where hope outlasted might. Night brought reprieve. Bolton withdrew to camp. Second day broke silver, but stained red before noon. Supplies ran low. Water wheels splintered under bombardment. Edmure proposed surrender. Maester warned of plague if wells cracked. Bran listened, then climbed tower. The same vantage from which he watched Brienne depart, and prayed to old gods carved in his memory. Wind carried faint whisper. Rope, harness, wings. He descended, commanding Fletchers to strip bed linens for rope. He ordered swimmers among garrison to brace for covert sortie downriver to beg Mallister aid. Men obeyed, galvanized by improbable resolve. By midnight, 2 coracles slipped under moonshadow, carrying messages hidden in arrow shafts. Bran watched them vanish, faith grappling hope. Ziga ground on. Bolton sent envoys daily. Bran refused. Catelyn emerged from confinement to aid wounded, dignity unbowed. Seeing her steady hands stanch soldiers bleeding, Bran felt kinship. They were both applying stitches to Realm's tattered skin. When rations dwindled to rats and riverweed, children's cries pierced his composure. He convened council, voice hoarse. We survive until help comes or walls fall. But we do not bargain away our souls. Lords looked upon parchment-thin boy and saw steel. Help arrived on 7th dawn. Silver trout banners of House Mallister, flanked by Blackwood ravens and bracken horses, riding hard. Mallister fleet on Red Fork rained arrows at Bolton camp, while river knights stormed banks. Bolton forces, caught between water and walls, faltered. Edmure rallied Sally. Bran among them despite protests. Gates thundered open. Bran rode cousin, Brienne's lessons ghosting through muscles. Steel clanged. Shields shattered. Amid turmoil, he glimpsed a tall helm crested with blue lily. Brienne returned, carving path toward him. Jaime rode beside her, unchained, wielding borrowed sword with lethal grace. For heartbeat Bran's mind reeled. Then Brienne reached him, parrying blow aimed at his unguarded side. "Wings unbroken," she said, grin ragged with exhaustion. Together, they pressed on. Battle tide shifted when gray wind escaped Frey treachery, jaws crimson, burst from archway, tearing fear into Bolton lines. Ruse's bannerman broke, rout cascaded. When last arrow fell, dawn crowned ruins with pink gold. Bolton dead littered field. Survivors fled. Inside River Run, cheers rose raw. Bran dismounted, legs trembling. Brienne embraced him as though he were still that boy on Winterfell rooftops. Jaime bowed, surprising cordiality. "The realm owes debt to unlikely alliances," he quipped, glancing at Brienne. Yet his eyes lingered on Bran with something like respect. Perhaps sparing a child once lost to his cruelty offered shard of absolution. Catelyn knelt before her unbroken son, tears flowing. Brienne reported. She had delivered Jaime to King's Landing but found Ned executed, Sansa hostage, Arya missing. Kingslayer exchanged instead for promise to return Stark girls. Brienne then rode north, gathering Mallister and Blackwood aid upon hearing of Bolton's siege. She arrived as last light allowed. In war room where maps spattered with wine and blood, lords hailed Bran as voice of House Stark. Ravens flew to loyal houses proclaiming him Prince of Winterfell, regent till Robb's fate proven. Edmure yielded command with bowed head. Bran accepted mantle heavy as maester chain, though his shoulders seemed to broaden to fit. In quiet after council, he asked Brienne, "Did I keep Winterfell here?" Tapping chest. She smiled, eyes shining. "I felt its hearth when I found you on the wall." Months stretched luminous and cruel. Rebuilding walls, burying dead, forging pacts. Brienne trained boys and girls alike in defense, claiming war spared no distinction. Bran ordered granaries fortified, wells doubled. He rode along river villages, dispensing justice with measured fairness. In dreams he still flew over snow forests, ravens guiding. Sometimes he envisioned distant wall of ice shimmering beneath aurora, a call older than thrones. One evening, when harvest moon swelled tipsy on horizon, he met Brienne by parapet, where a cool wind combed fields of wheat rippling like lion's mane. "I feel tug northward," he confessed. "Something waits." Brienne nodded. Duty seldom chooses easy roads. He turned to her. "Will you ride with me? Past wall. Perhaps, if path bends that way." She laughed softly. "I swore to keep you safe from tower's edge. Beyond those edges, beyond walls of men, danger grows. Yet I will ride, so long as honor guides your cause." Bran smiled, relief mixing with anticipation. Together they watched fireflies wink alive over river, twin sparks of promise. Before journey, they visited Winterfell, reborn under snowfall. Ghost greeted them, muzzle silvered. Bran climbed the eastern rampart where he once dreamed of flight. Brienne stood close, rope harness still coiled across her shoulder by habit. Bran eased onto Merlon, breathing calm. Wind tossed his cloak like wings. He glanced at Brienne, who nodded. He stretched arms, feeling pull of horizon. "One day I'll soar for true," he said. Brienne placed palm flat against stone between them. "And I'll hold rope tethering you to earth, until you choose to let go." In silence they watched dawn-stained sky vermilion. Somewhere beyond far rivers, beyond ice and shadow, war still churned, throne still beckoned. But here, atop Winterfell reborn, boy and knight stood balanced between stone and sky. Oath and dream, each the other's anchor and aspiration. And the morning breeze carried scent of pine, of snowmelt, and of stories yet unwritten. Spiraling upward like ravens toward a sun neither height nor fall could dim. K. Bran rose before the dawn candle was lit, the chilled air of Winterfell brushing his cheeks as though the old castle were breathing quietly, reminding him that walls could be as alive as people. He dressed without summoning a servant, layer by layer, wool and leather, gray cloak clasped at the throat with the simple direwolf pin Robb once wore as a boy. In the courtyard, the sky held that tremulous band of aquamarine which only appears in the few breaths before sunrise, and from its hush drifted the distant rumble of tanners' hammers and the iron hiss of forge bellows warming. He crossed the flagstones, each one worn to shallow bowls by generations of northern boots, toward the training yard where Brienne already traced arcs of silver with Oathkeeper, her breath a white pennant trailing every slash. He watched her a moment, how each stroke followed not merely muscle but intention, an unbroken conversation between heart and steel. Then stepped within the beaten circle. She noticed him at once, lowering the blade as if it too paid him respect. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. He shook his head. "Too much to think." The words tasted simpler than the visions tunneling across his dreams, but they sufficed. She offered him a practice sword, the same ashwood they had sparred with among Riverrun's lilies, its grip wrapped in new leather. He took stance as she'd taught, knees soft, weight balanced as though on leaf ice, spine long like a column of smoke. They moved, slowly at first, the rhythmic patter of wood on wood echoing off stone, then faster, a bright staccato that startled a rook perched on the ramparts into flapping admonition. Under Brienne's tutelage, Bran learned how a warrior breathed through each parry, how a fighter listened with skin for a shift of wind along blade, and how a leader kept calm when sweat stung his eyes. By the time sun crested over eastern towers, sweat darkened Bran's tunic, and a grin split his face despite the burn in shoulders and thighs. Servants brought breakfast pastries, filled with spiced apple and small shards of crisp bacon. Bran perched on an upturned sparring dummy, devouring two before they cooled. Brienne gnawed hers standing, gaze flicking north where pale mountains lay row upon row like sleeping direwolves. "We ride tomorrow," she said, almost to herself. Bran swallowed, past the wall. She nodded. "All the way to Castle Black, and if the Rangers agree, beyond." He followed her eyes. What waited beyond he could not name fully. Only shapes glimpsed in dream, heartbeats under snow, and the hush that comes before wolves begin to howl. Preparations consumed the day. Maester Walken's ravens flew in pairs carrying messages, to Commander Jeor Mormont at Castle Black, to Howland Reed in the Neck, to the Mallisters and Mandrellas, urging readiness. Bran's order sealed each parchment. The wax cooled beneath his direwolf stamp. Glover carpenters reinforced the supply wagons for rough track. Blacksmiths fitted ice cleats on donkey hooves. Brienne inspected every saddle girth, replaced rawhide reins with plated hemp less likely to freeze brittle. Arya's letter arrived by Spearhawk from somewhere far south, a scribble of road dust sentiment. "Keep your eyes sharp, little brother. I still owe you lessons in water dancing." Bran folded the parchment thrice and placed it in his breast pocket like a shield against loneliness. At midday, Jon Snow rode into the yard, his face stiff with wind and solemn memory. Bran met him halfway, and they embraced, each clutching the other as though measuring the years lost since that morning Jon had left for the wall. Ghost padded behind, muzzle still speckled with frost. Jon's hair streaked with silver at the temples, nothing to do with age, everything to do with nights spent under open winter skies. Over supper in the great hall, Jon listened to Bran's plan to journey beyond the wall in search of the three-eyed crow, while Brienne watched the half-brothers speak a language older than northern hills. The language of trust forged long before war contorted their paths. Jon, after the long silence of consideration, said only, "Then I ride with you, command or no command." Behind the words lay years of vow to the Night's Watch, but another vow, older, ruled his blood. Protect family. Bran clasped Jon's wrist. "I thought you might." Later, while snow began to sift down outside like flour from a baker's sieve, Bran walked the empty gallery above the Hall of Heroes, letting torchlight flicker across statues of first men and Stark kings. Bronze swords upheld by stone hands glimmered, granite eyes seemed to follow him. He paused before a forgotten lord whose name had eroded, chisel marks swallowed by centuries. "Did you dream of birds that could speak?" he asked the silent stone. "Did you wonder if ice remembered footsteps?" A gust hissed through arrow slits. The flames bowed. He closed eyes and followed the sound within until he felt it curve. Then it opened, vast and dark, into the grove of weirwood trees behind his skull. In that inward place, ravens roosted upon bone-white branches, and a single crow with 3 black eyes turned its head slowly, fixing him with gaze as ancient as falling snow. "Fly," it croaked. The word rattled like loose stones in a dry wall. Bran felt the tug again. Steady, patient. "Tomorrow," he told it. "We ride tomorrow." Dawn broke silver. The party assembled before the broken gatehouse where Rhymes still glazed stones cracked by Theon's ironborn years prior. Horses stamped, steam billowing. Jon wore a cloak of crow-black fur over ringmail. Brienne donned scaled mail the color of dappled steelhead, Oathkeeper across her back. Sir Roderick, gray of beard yet unbent, insisted on accompanying with 30 seasoned men. From the winter town came hunters versed in tracking elk across drifts. From the lakes a few hardy spearwives, flinty as wolf teeth, bearing iron hooks and nets for unknown monsters beneath the ice. They numbered 60 souls, 2 wagons, 1 donkey line, and the quiet trust of a castle's ghosts. Catelyn saw them off beside the gate, her eyes rimmed in red, but voice clear as snowmelt. "Find what calls you," she said, smoothing Bran's cloak, "and come home." He kissed her cheek. Arya's words echoed, "Keep eyes sharp." With a clatter of hooves they passed under the portcullis. The outer world swallowed them whole. The King's Road north of Winterfell soon dwindled into little more than packed earth, where wagon wheels had scarred ruts that filled with ice. Pines closed in. Branches stooped heavy with snow lanterns that dropped silently behind them. The party moved in wedge formation. Brienne and Jon at point, Bran riding between. He studied the hush. How wind sighed low like distant surf. How snowflakes sometimes spun as though drawn by invisible fingers. In the afternoons, they pressed hard to reach the frozen banks of the shivering sea, where they camped beneath auroras flaring green across heaven, like curtains in some vast palace of gods. Around the fire, old Nan's stories breathed anew. Tales of giants with ice-blue hearts, children carved from moonlight, and kings whose crowns were frozen tears. Bran listened, eyes reflecting the fire, and the others watched him as though he himself were a story yet unfolding. In the 3rd week, the land began its long, slow climb toward the wall. Jagged foothills reared under blankets of pine. Bays vanished beneath snow so deep their horses trudged belly high. Only the tallest trees marked the edges of ravines. Once, a great elk stag broke from the trees, antlers festooned with frost, and Jon's archers knocked arrows, but Bran shook his head. "Let him run," he said. "Life so large should not end in pot amid such deathly silence." And they watched until the elk faded ghost-like among drifting flakes. A storm hit 2 days later, swallowing sky and earth. They pitched tents in lee of a granite outcrop, linen walls rattling like drumskins. Brienne sent 2 scouts to circle the camp's margin. They returned hours later, beards leonine with ice, claiming shapes moved just outside the lantern glow. "Wind-born shadows," declared one. But fear tinctured his tone. Brienne ordered a double watch. Through the night, Bran lay awake under firs, listening to the gale's countless voices. Within the howl, he heard a deeper note, mournful and patient, like bones rubbing in a charnel wind. "Fly," whispered the crow. And he pressed hands over ears. Not yet. When at last dawn unveiled clear skies, the storm's wrath revealed itself in broken spruce and drifts that swallowed whole pack ponies. They dug out, cursed frost-bitten fingers, then marched. That night, they reached the small wildling village of Hardhome, long abandoned, its charred timber frames jutting from snow like charnel ribs. Jon walked among the ruins with Bran beside him, ghostly steps muffled. "Here I first learned what follows winter," Jon murmured, remembering Hardhome's horrors. Bran felt it too, an ache in air, as though the world withheld breath. Past Hardhome, the final league to the wall unfurled like a frozen rampart of silence. Suddenly, without herald, there it stood. The wall, a colossal crescent of ice gleaming blue in moonlight, impossibly vast, so tall Bran's neck ached looking. Torches flickered atop narrow parapets where black silhouettes patrolled. Beneath its shadow roared castle-black skates, their ironwood timbers banded in aged bronze. Commander Mormont greeted the party in the yard, his great raven perched cawing on shoulder. Men of the watch studied Brienne's unusual height, the direwolf on Bran's cloak, Joan's familiar stride now born with new purpose. After formalities, the old bear turned to Bran. "Never thought to see a boy lord ride north of my wall," he rumbled. "But old bones aren't given to surprises anymore." Bran inclined his head, feeling small beneath that shaggy scrutiny, yet not overawed. In the commander's chambers they planned. Provisions from the watch stores, fresh mounts from Eastwatch. 24 rangers to escort them through the haunted forest. "White walkers, they've been quiet," Mormont warned. "But quiet's only the breath they draw before screaming." That night, Bran stood alone atop the wall. The night wind, a blade too keen to draw full breath. Far below, forest rippled silver under moon. Beyond, the land dissolved into white infinity. Here the sky seemed closer, and arms reached to snatch a star. He imagined the raven perched on his shoulder now, urging him onward. He closed eyes and listened. Heart of the wall thrumming like slow drums of giants, groan of ice shifting under its own unimaginable weight, and above it all the hush of an ancient waiting. They left before dawn, torches bobbing down the switchback stairs. At the forest floor, rangers formed vanguard, black cloaks stark against snow. The haunted forest welcomed them with quiet too perfect, as though every branch held its breath. Ashen birches creaked overhead. Underfoot, crusted snow squealed faint with each step. By midday they came upon a clearing where a lone weirwood rose, trunk twisted like sinew, leaves blood-red amid winter. Bran felt it before he saw it, a tug in his marrow. He approached, parted rangers' ranks. The face carved into the heart tree's bark seemed newer than it should, cheeks less eroded, eyes cut deep. He knelt, gloved hand brushing root, and closed eyes. The forest fell away. He stood upon a plain of infinite frost, stars swirling overhead like ash in slow spiral. The three-eyed crow hopped along a branch that sprouted from nowhere, feathers blacker than lightlessness. "Fly," it said. Bran felt his body lighten, bones hollow into quills. Wind filled him, and he rose. From above, he saw a pattern etched in ice. An ancient sigil of swirling arms, familiar from tales whispered of the first man's earliest wars. At its center stood figures made entirely of night, blue flame eyes, raising icy arms as though in benediction or challenge. Then a flash. A sword of light, burning red, clashed with blades of despair. Across distances immeasurable, Bran heard the clang. He fell back into himself with a gasp. Brienne knelt beside him, her gauntlet steady on his shoulder. "What did you see?" He couldn't shape the vision to words, only heard his breathing, distorted as though echoing in a well. He rose shakily, wiping frozen tears. "We must go on," he said. Brienne searched his face but nodded. Days blurred into cautious advance. They crossed frozen rivers whose surfaces fractured under horse weight, mending with noises like low thunder. Twice they discovered wildling camps deserted, fires doused in haste, footprints trailing into darkness that seemed to swallow them mid-stride. In one tumble-down hut, Bran found children's toys carved from bone left in the snow. He pocketed a tiny bear, resolved it would not remain to freeze forgotten. One afternoon, the ranger ahead signaled halt. Hand raised, body rigid. Brienne threaded forward, Bran behind her. Across a clearing, a solitary figure knelt in snow, hair black and matted, skin gleaming faintly, not with sweat, but with rime, as if the cold were growing from within. It wore remnants of a night's watch cloak, torn. At the sound of branches shifting, the figure twisted, eyes cerulean, pupils points of frost. No breath rose from its lips. The ranger loosed an arrow. It thudded into chest, but creature only tilted head. Brienne shoved Bran behind a fir trunk, stepped ahead, Oathkeeper rasping free. Jon shouldered Longclaw and advanced, The white stood, limbs awkward as marionette. It opened cracked lips in silent snarl, then rushed. Steel met ice. Jon's Valyrian blade cleaved shoulder. Ghostly blue flames sizzled along wound, severing arm. Yet the white grasped Jon's throat with other hand until Brienne's sword took the limb above elbow. Still it lunged, grinding broken teeth. At last a ranger struck flint, torch whooshed alight, and flame reclaimed the corpse in sigh of freezing steam. Bran's heart hammered. He realized, sudden, the white's face had looked vaguely familiar. The groom slain in the ambush along the Red Fork. War, it seemed, recycled bodies for darker purposes. That night, they camped near a ring of standing stones half buried in snow. Jon stood watch, but Bran could not sleep. He moved close to embers, Brienne opposite, her face flickering gold. "They'll come again," she said low. He nodded. "Dreams show me spirals, swords of flame. Ice kings. I don't know what to change." She considered. Dreams guide, but waking hands must shape the world. He tried to smile. "Then mine are small." She answered, "The world is shaped by small parts, each doing their best. Even the wall is just a countless layering of snowflakes." He looked at her, the weight easing. He held out the bone bear. She turned it in glove, eyebrow lifting. "A talisman," he said. "For luck." She tucked it inside her gorget. 2 days later, the forest thinned, revealing a valley encircled by mountains where snow blew in whorls like dancing ghosts. In its heart stood a blackened fortress carved partly from ice, partly from obsidian-veined rock, the ancient holdfast of the children of the forest, if tales spoke true. Broken spires jutted, half collapsed. Bran's blood thrummed as they approached. The rangers formed perimeter. Brienne, Jon, Bran, and 2 others entered. Inside, hallways wound springlessly. Angular passages lit by faint bluish luminescence, seeping through cracks in obsidian. Glyphs lined walls, sharp as fresh chisel marks depicting men, trees, and something between. At center they found a cavern where roots of a colossal weirwood arched through ceiling like ribs of a slumbering beast. Here, a pool mirrored pale light. Bran stepped to edge. The water's surface quivered, though no breeze stirred. He knelt. The moment fingers brushed that mirror, his senses shattered outward. He stood again in starlit waste, yet now the crow perched upon gnarled root before him, but cracks ran across its beak. Not Crowman, an old man with eyes milky and skin bark thin, seated within the tree's embrace. Yet through him, Bran saw ravens and branches and streams of years. The voice echoed without lips moving. "We have waited." Bran understood the Old One to be Bloodraven, Brynden Rivers, last Green's ear. "Teach me," Bran said. The Old One lifted weathered hand. "The greatest wing is memory. Fly there first." Visions churned. First men signing pact with children beneath starry boughs. Aegon's dragons burning Harrenhal. Young Ned Stark cleaning ice upon a rainy morning. Catelyn singing Bran asleep by hearth. Brienne kneeling before Catelyn in Riverrun. Every oath given, every step taken, woven into trembling tapestry. He returned gasping, Brienne's arms catching him. He spoke quickly, voice cracking. Night King awakens in the spiral of frost fangs. He calls corpses to him. We have to stand at the Weirwood's door before he walks south. Jon exchanged glance with Brienne. How many? Bran shook. An army. But the children left things here, dragon-glass secrets. He gestured to recesses in walls where dull glints now materialized. Crates of obsidian blades. Arrowheads, spear points, centuries preserved in dry cold. They spent 3 frantic days forging weapons, edge-testing against stone. Maester Edward of the Watch brewed pitch oil that burned hot even upon snow. Scouts returned with tidings. Large force of dead massing 2 leagues east. Winter fog boiled as unnatural cold. On dawn of 4th day, Bran led defenders to a low pass choked by fallen pines. A funnel. They stacked fire traps, buried glass shards. Brienne stood at his side in iron half-plate studded with dragon glass spikes like blooming nightshade. Jon marshaled rangers into staggered ranks, every second man carrying torches wound in oilcloth. When the dead arrived, snow preceded them in a wall. Figures emerged. Hundreds, thousands, blue-lit eyes, rusted armor clanking, weapons rimed with frost. At their center rode a tall, thin shape astride skeletal horse, crown of jagged ice horns. The Night King. The first assault crashed like a wave. Flaming arrows licked twilight. Whites ignited, stumbling into their own ranks, sowing confusion. Yet for every corpse that burned, two climbed over. Jon and Brienne fought back to back, his long claw dulling blue aura, with each white felled, her Oathkeeper shearing limbs faster than wind scythes wheat. Bran, stationed on a ridge, focused on the Night King, feeling a thread linking them like northern lights drawn between hearts. Memories wing. He closed his eyes within the din, let consciousness slip into the weirwood roots that spiderwebbed under battlefield. Ancient network humming like harp strings. He touched one root, then hundreds, flowing through ground to the Night King's steed, up through icy spine, into mind colder than moon. Memories there, a first man bound to a weirwood spear receiving obsidian dagger to chest, blue fire in flaming veins. Pain, betrayal, purpose. He whispered, "Remember who you were." For a heartbeat the Night King paused, blade raised. But centuries of ice could not melt in a sigh. He resumed advance. Bran shifted tactics, gorging into a circling murder of ravens. Screeching they dived, pecking glowing eyes, small claws ripping fleshless muscle. Momentary disruption opened lines for Jon's squad to pour pitch oil. Ignite 40 dead in howling bonfire. Still, the Night King pressed, now 30 paces distant. Brienne saw him, understanding the line could not hold. She sprinted, leaped from uprooted trunk, drove Oathkeeper in two-hand arc toward his head. He parried with spear of crystal and ice, clash singing like chimes. She felt numb lances travel through arms from contact with cold beyond ice. They traded blows, lightning fast. Jon joined, Longclaw wheeling. Together they pressed, but Night King moved as river of glass, impossible angles, spear-sweeping arcs that birthed freezing fog. A glancing strike shattered Brienne's pauldron, leaving shoulder burning with frostbite. Bran, through raven eyes, saw them falter. He dove mind into ground again, reached root beneath Night King. He found memory of children's song, lullaby in language lost, sung by mother long dead when he was still flesh. Bran whispered the tune through root, through ice, into heart forgotten. The Night King hesitated, spear lowering fraction. Brienne sensed the opening. With roar she thrust dragonglass dagger, gift of children, beneath breastplate seam. Crystal exploded into spiderweb cracks, blue light spilled like sunrise. Night King's eyes widened, voice escaping in ancient gasp. He staggered. Jon drove Longclaw through throat. The ice shivered. A boom of silence erupted. Every white collapsed, strings cut. Snow settled. Dawn's pale disk rose over ridges. Steam curled from melting corpses. Brienne ripped off shattered pauldron, shoulder blackening from cold. Jon steadying her, Bran descending ridge on trembling legs. They met amid stillness, breaths hitching. Bran placed hand on Brienne's frost-bitten skin, warmth pulsed from his palm, roots of weirwood lending borrowed life. She hissed, then exhaled, pain receding. He staggered but steadied. Victorious yet battered, they burned remaining bodies until ash mingled with dawn wind. Rangers gathered weapons, wounded counted, dead mourned. When pyres smoldered low, Bran faced the cavern ford again. "This must be watched," he said. Brienne nodded. Jon pledged a new garrison of both Night's Watch and Stark men, blending black and gray. Journey home unfolded slow, like thaw or longest night. Along path, they marked trees with dragonglass glyphs, warnings, and wards. At Castle Black, they were hailed as quiet legends, though Bran dismissed titles. Resting one evening, Jon found him atop wall gazing south. "You flew," Jon said. Bran shook head. "Not yet. I've only learned how wind begins." Jon smiled, a rare gentleness. Then I'll keep skies clear until you're ready. When they returned to Winterfell, spring teased the air. Tiny rivulets singing under ice, scent of pine resin rising. People gathered in yard, some kneeling, others crying. Bran spoke not of heroics but of vigilance. Evil, once broken, seeps back like meltwater if land forgets. He ordered weirwoods throughout the north tended, ravens trained to carry songs as well as warnings. Brienne watched him address them, voice steady, and saw the boy who once dangled from towers now shaping his own. Weeks later, on quiet sunset, Bran climbed the east wall alone. Brienne followed far enough for comfort, near enough for rescue. Bran stood upon Merlon, eyes closed. Wind tousled hair. He opened arms, but this time no rope cinched his waist. Slowly, he leaned forward, not falling but balanced, just at cusp. Inside he felt wings, not in flesh but in memory, in every raven that ever flew, in every snowflake drifting on unseen currents. He breathed out. Wind cradled him. He stepped back safely, turned. Brienne exhaled ragged laugh. Thought you'd fly away. Bran smiled. One day perhaps. But today I stay, because the ground needs me. He offered her the bone bearer, returned now warm from his pocket. The luck was yours. She closed fingers around it. Shared, she corrected. And in the hush between sun's last red and night's first star, the castle, the land, and the lone memory of old gods held their breath together, knowing the story was not ended but mended, stitched by honor, tempered by loss, and carried on wings still unfolding.